The small suburban town of Willow Creek was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and a high school where everyone seemed to know each other's business. It wasn't the kind of place where newcomers blended in easily. So when 16-year-old Emily Carter walked through the doors of Willow Creek High on her first day, all eyes were on her. She carried herself differently, her back straight, her steps confident, and her gaze steady, as if she had nothing to fear. But it wasn't just her posture that caught people's attention. It was the mystery surrounding her. Emily didn't say much during introductions in homeroom. When the teacher asked her to share something about herself, she simply smiled and said, "I like drawing and spending time outdoors." Her voice was calm, almost too calm for someone stepping into unfamiliar territory. Some students whispered among themselves, speculating about why she moved here. Was her family running from trouble? Did she get expelled from her old school? Or maybe, just maybe, she was hiding some secret talent or skill. At lunchtime, Emily sat alone under a large oak tree near the edge of the campus. She pulled out a sketchbook and began drawing, completely absorbed in her work. From afar, she looked harmless, just another quiet new girl trying to figure things out. But not everyone saw her that way. Across the courtyard, Jake Thompson and his crew of self-proclaimed popular kids noticed her sitting by herself. Jake, nicknamed the Tank because of his imposing size and aggressive attitude, smirked at his friends. "Looks like we've got fresh meat," he said, nudging his buddy. "Let's see how long she lasts." Jake's group wasn't exactly feared for their intelligence, but they ruled the school with intimidation. They thrived on making others feel small. It gave them a twisted sense of power. And Emily, with her quiet confidence and lack of visible allies, seemed like the perfect target. As they approached her, their shadows loomed over her sketchbook. "Hey, new girl," Jake called out loudly enough to turn heads. "What are you doing over here all alone?" Emily glanced up briefly, her pencil pausing mid-stroke. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without missing a beat, she replied, "Drawing. What does it look like?" Her tone was polite but firm, leaving no room for argument. The response threw Jake off balance. Most kids either cowered or tried to laugh along when he teased them, but Emily acted like he was just another person, not someone to be afraid of. One of Jake's friends chimed in, mockingly asking if she drew pictures of cats or flowers. Emily tilted her head slightly, studying them as though they were part of an experiment. "Nope," she said finally. "Just landscapes." There was something unnerving about the way she held their gaze, refusing to blink or look away. It was as if she could see right through their bravado, past the masks they wore to appear tough. Jake frowned, unsure how to handle this unexpected reaction. He decided to push harder. "You know, sitting alone isn't cool around here," he said, crossing his arms. "Maybe you should hang out with us instead." His tone dripped with sarcasm, and his friends snickered obediently. But Emily didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she closed her sketchbook gently and stood up, meeting him eye to eye, despite the height difference. "I think I'll pass," she said evenly. "But thanks for the offer." With that, she slung her bag over her shoulder and walked away, leaving Jake and his crew staring after her in stunned silence. None of them knew it yet, but they had just picked on the wrong person, and their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't imagine. The next few days at Willow Creek High felt like a ticking time bomb. Emily continued to keep to herself, sketching in her notebook during lunch and navigating the hallways with quiet determination. She didn't seek attention, but she couldn't avoid it either, not when Jake Thompson and his crew seemed determined to make her life difficult. They weren't used to being dismissed so casually, especially not by someone as unassuming as Emily. Her composure only fueled their frustration, and they began plotting ways to rattle her. It started small. In history class, one of Jake's friends accidentally knocked her books off her desk while walking by. When she bent down to pick them up, he muttered something under his breath about how clumsy new kids were. Emily didn't react. She simply straightened up, brushed off her hands, and took her seat without saying a word. The lack of response left him glaring at her back, confused and irritated. It was as if she didn't care, or worse, as if she saw right through their antics. By midweek, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. During lunch, he cornered Emily near the water fountain, blocking her path with his bulky frame. His friend stood nearby, snickering as usual. "Hey, new girl," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think you're too good to talk to us or something?" Emily turned to face him, her expression calm but unreadable. "Nope," she replied evenly. "Just busy." Her nonchalant attitude infuriated Jake even more. He leaned closer, trying to intimidate her with his size. "Listen up," he growled, lowering his voice. "Things work differently around here. You better start showing some respect, or else." Emily tilted her head slightly, studying him as though he were a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Respect is earned," she said finally, her tone firm but steady. "Not demanded." Then, before Jake could respond, she stepped around him and walked away, leaving him standing there with clenched fists and a scowl that deepened with every step she took. Word spread quickly among Jake's group about Emily's defiance. To them, it wasn't just annoying, it was personal. No one talked back to Jake like that, and got away with it. Determined to prove a point, they hatched a plan for the following day. This time, they would make sure she couldn't just walk away. The setup happened during gym class, a chaotic game of dodgeball where Jake and his crew controlled the court. One of his friends deliberately targeted Emily with a hard throw, aiming to knock her off balance. The ball hit her shoulder with a loud thud, drawing gasps from some of the other students. But instead of stumbling or crying out, Emily barely flinched. She caught the ball on the rebound and held it tightly, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. Jake smirked from across the court, clearly enjoying himself. "What's wrong, new girl?" he called out loudly. "Can't handle a little competition?" For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The gym fell silent except for the faint squeak of sneakers on polished floors. Emily stood motionless, her grip tightening on the ball. Then, without warning, she spun around and hurled it back with precision and force. The ball sailed across the court like a missile, hitting its mark dead center, right in Jake's chest. He staggered backward, nearly losing his footing, as stunned murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake's face burned red with embarrassment as he tried to regain his composure. "You're gonna regret that," he spat, pointing a finger at her, but Emily didn't look fazed. She met his glare head-on, her jaw set firmly. Without another word, she walked off the court, leaving behind a scene buzzing with shock and whispered speculation. Later that afternoon, as Emily sat alone under the oak tree finishing another sketch, she reflected on what had happened. She hadn't meant to escalate things, but she also knew she couldn't let people push her around. Still, she wondered if standing her ground would bring more trouble than she bargained for. Little did she know, the real storm was yet to come, and Jake wasn't done testing her limits. At home, Emily's life was a stark contrast to the tension brewing at school. Her family lived in a modest house on the edge of town, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the evening breeze. The backyard was her sanctuary, a quiet space where she could think, move, and let go of the stress from the day. It was here, under the fading light of dusk, that Emily practiced the skills she had honed over years of training. Her uncle, a retired Marine drill instructor named Mark, had been more than just family. He was her mentor. When Emily was younger, he would visit during holidays and spend hours teaching her discipline, focus, and self-defense. At first, it started as playful exercises, but as she grew older, the lessons became more serious. Mark believed everyone should know how to protect themselves, not out of aggression, but as a way to build confidence and resilience. "Strength isn't about throwing punches," he'd always say. "It's about knowing when, and when not, to use what you've learned." Emily moved through the familiar routines now, her body flowing effortlessly between stances and strikes. She practiced kicks, blocks, and evasive maneuvers with precision, each motion sharp and deliberate. Her father, Tom, watched from the kitchen window with a mix of pride and amusement. He often joked that Emily could probably take down grown men twice her size if she wanted to, though he never doubted the truth behind his words. To him, her training wasn't just about physical skill. It was about mental toughness, something she carried with her everywhere she went. Inside the house, dinner was ready, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. Emily's mother, Sarah, called her in from the backyard. As they sat around the table together, the conversation turned to Emily's new school. "How's it going so far?" Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. She knew moving to a new town wasn't easy, especially for someone as reserved as Emily. "It's fine," Emily replied, shrugging casually, "just getting used to things." She didn't mention the run-ins with Jake or the growing tension in the hallways. Instead, she focused on describing her classes and the teachers, careful not to worry her parents. But Tom noticed the slight hesitation in her voice. "Anyone giving you trouble?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp. He had seen enough in his own military career to recognize when someone was holding back. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "Not really," she said finally. "Just some guy trying too hard to act tough. Nothing I can't handle." She gave him a small smile, hoping to ease any concerns he might have. Tom chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Kid's got guts, I'll give her that," he said, raising an eyebrow. "But remember, Em, don't hesitate to tell us if things get worse. We're here for you." Sarah nodded in agreement, reaching across the table to squeeze Emily's hand. "Your dad's right. You don't have to deal with anything alone." Emily appreciated their support, even if she didn't fully share their worries. Deep down, she knew Jake wouldn't stop after what happened in gym class. If anything, he'd only double down, determined to prove he was stronger. But Emily also knew she couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Uncle Mark's lessons echoed in her mind. Stay calm, stay focused, and trust yourself. After dinner, Emily retreated to her room, flipping through old photos of her and Mark during one of their training sessions. In the pictures, she looked younger, smaller, and less confident, but still determined. Those memories grounded her, reminding her of how far she'd come. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, she felt ready. Whatever Jake and his crew had planned next, she knew one thing for certain. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and when the time came, she would show them exactly what that meant. Jake Thompson wasn't used to being challenged. In his world, fear was currency, and intimidation was the easiest way to get what he wanted. But Emily Carter was different, too calm, too composed, and far too unpredictable. Her refusal to back down during their encounters only fueled his frustration, gnawing at him like a splinter he couldn't remove. By Friday morning, Jake had decided it was time to put an end to this once and for all. He didn't just want to embarrass her, he wanted to break her. The plan came together quickly. During third period, Jake gathered his crew in the hallway, whispering instructions under his breath. "We'll corner her after lunch," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Make sure she knows there's no way out." His friends nodded eagerly, thrilled to be part of something that promised chaos. They chose the perfect spot, a narrow corridor near the science labs, rarely used by students and almost always empty. It would be easy to trap her there without drawing too much attention. When the bell rang for lunch, Emily walked out of her classroom as usual, heading toward the courtyard where she liked to sit alone. She noticed Jake and his group lingering nearby, watching her every move, but she didn't let it bother her. If anything, their constant presence had become almost predictable, a dull hum in the background of her day. She grabbed a sandwich from her bag and settled under the oak tree, sketching absentmindly while keeping half an eye on them. After eating, she headed back inside, unaware of the trap waiting ahead. As she turned into the hallway leading to her next class, Jake stepped out from behind a corner, blocking her path. Two of his friends appeared behind her, sealing off any escape route. For a moment, the three of them stood there, smirking, reveling in the power they thought they held over her. "You really don't get it, do you?" Jake sneered, stepping closer until he towered over her. "I'm done playing games. Either you start showing some respect, or things are gonna get ugly." Emily looked up at him, her expression unreadable. There was no trace of panic or hesitation in her eyes, only a quiet intensity that made Jake uneasy. "Respect isn't earned by scaring people," she said evenly. "And trust me, you don't want to push this." Her words hit a nerve. Jake clenched his fists, his face flushing red with anger. "You think you're so tough." He spat, shoving her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble backward. "Let's see how tough you are when I—" Before he could finish, Emily moved. Faster than anyone could react, she sidestepped his second shove and grabbed his wrist, twisting it firmly but not painfully. The motion caught Jake completely off guard. He froze, stunned, as she leaned in close enough for only him to hear. "I warned you," she whispered, her voice steady but laced with steel. "Back off." For a split second, Jake hesitated. Then, realizing his friends were still watching, he yanked his arm free and took a step back, his bravado crumbling. "This isn't over," he muttered, glaring at her before storming off down the hall. His crew followed silently, their earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. Emily watched them go, her heart pounding but her breathing steady. She hadn't meant to escalate things, but she also knew she couldn't afford to show weakness, not with someone like Jake. Still, as she adjusted her backpack and continued toward class, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from finished. Whatever happened next, she realized, would change everything, for better or worse. The tension between Emily and Jake reached its boiling point during gym class on Monday afternoon. Word had spread quickly about their confrontation in the hallway, and students whispered excitedly as they filed into the gymnasium. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of curiosity and anticipation hanging in the air. Everyone knew something big was coming. They just didn't know what. Jake had spent the weekend stewing over his humiliation. He couldn't shake the image of Emily's calm, unflinching gaze, or the way she turned his own strength against him with such ease. To make matters worse, his friends were starting to question his authority. "Maybe we should leave her alone," one of them suggested nervously after hearing rumors about how Emily had handled herself in the past. But Jake wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. If anything, he was more determined than ever to prove that no new girl could outsmart him. His plan for today was simple: humiliate her in front of everyone. During a game of dodgeball, he positioned himself and his crew strategically around the court, making sure Emily was surrounded. When the whistle blew, chaos erupted as balls flew through the air, hitting targets and knocking players out of the game. Jake barked orders at his teammates, keeping his eyes locked on Emily. Finally, he seized his chance. With a smirk, he hurled a ball directly at her knees, aiming to trip her up in full view of the entire class. But Emily didn't fall. Instead, she reacted faster than anyone expected. As the ball zoomed toward her feet, she pivoted gracefully, catching it midair with precision. Without missing a beat, she spun around and threw it back with incredible speed and accuracy. The ball slammed into Jake's chest so hard that he stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance. For a moment, the gym fell silent, all eyes wide with shock, as Jake struggled to regain his footing. His face burned red with embarrassment as murmurs rippled through the crowd. "What's wrong, Jake?" Emily called out, her voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thought you were tougher than this." Jake's anger flared instantly. Humiliated and desperate to save face, he charged at her, ignoring the teacher's shouted warnings. "You're gonna pay for that," he growled, lunging forward with his arms outstretched. But Emily didn't flinch. She sidestepped him effortlessly, using his momentum against him. With a quick, practiced motion, she hooked her foot behind his ankle and pushed gently on his shoulder. Jake crashed to the floor with a thud, landing flat on his back in front of the entire class. The room erupted into gasps and scattered applause. Some students cheered openly for Emily, while others exchanged stunned glances, unable to believe what they'd just witnessed. Jake lay there for a moment, dazed and humiliated, before scrambling to his feet. His face was a mixture of rage and disbelief as he stared at Emily, who stood calmly, her arms crossed over her chest. "Had enough?" she asked quietly, her tone firm, but not cruel. Jake didn't answer. He glanced around at the sea of faces watching him, some amused, some sympathetic, and realized he'd lost control of the situation completely. Clenching his fists tightly, he stormed off the court without another word, his crew trailing behind him like shadows. The teacher blew the whistle sharply, calling an end to the game, but the damage was done. Emily's display of skill and composure had left an indelible mark on everyone present. As the class dispersed, whispers followed Emily wherever she went. Some students approached her hesitantly, offering congratulations or thanking her for standing up to Jake. Others kept their distance, unsure of what to make of her. But one thing was clear: Emily Carter was no longer just the quiet new girl. She had proven herself capable of handling whatever came her way. And Jake Thompson had learned the hard way not to underestimate her. By the end of the day, news of what happened in gym class had spread like wildfire across Willow Creek High. Students gathered in clusters, replaying the moment when Emily took down Jake with a mix of awe and disbelief. Some called her a hero. Others labeled her intimidating. But no matter the opinion, one thing was undeniable: Emily Carter had changed the dynamic of the school. And not everyone was happy about it. The administration quickly stepped in, summoning both Emily and Jake to the principal's office. The meeting was tense, with Jake's mother defending her son fiercely, insisting that Emily had provoked him. "She attacked my boy," she exclaimed, glaring at Emily as if she were the villain in the story. Meanwhile, Emily sat quietly, her hands folded neatly on her lap, listening without reacting. Her father, Tom, sat beside her, his posture relaxed, but his expression firm. He didn't raise his voice once, letting the facts speak for themselves. Principal Harris reviewed the incident carefully, watching security footage from the gymnasium cameras. It clearly showed Jake initiating physical contact and Emily acting purely in self-defense. After a long silence, he turned to Jake and his mother. "We can't condone violence, regardless of who started it," he said evenly. But based on the evidence, Emily acted appropriately to protect herself. Jake slumped in his chair, defeated, while his mother huffed indignantly. Emily remained calm throughout, though inside, she felt a swirl of emotions: relief, frustration, even guilt. She hadn't wanted things to escalate this far, but now there was no turning back. As they left the office, Jake avoided her gaze entirely, his usual bravado replaced by sullen anger. That evening, Emily sat alone in her room, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her parents knocked gently before entering, sitting down on either side of her bed. "You okay?" her mom asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "I don't know," Emily admitted after a pause. "I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, right? But why does it feel like I messed up somehow?" Her dad leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because standing your ground isn't always easy," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes doing the right thing still leaves you feeling uneasy. That doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you're human." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She knew he was right, but it didn't stop her from questioning whether there had been another way to handle the situation. Could she have walked away instead of confronting Jake? Would ignoring him have prevented all this drama, or would it have only emboldened him further? The next morning at school, Emily noticed a shift in how people treated her. Some students gave her wide berth, whispering behind their hands as she passed. Others approached her cautiously, asking questions about her training or thanking her for standing up to Jake. A few even confided in her about their own experiences with bullying, admitting they admired her courage, but didn't know how to stand up for themselves. This newfound attention weighed heavily on Emily. She hadn't sought recognition or praise, and the last thing she wanted was to be seen as someone untouchable. So, over the next few days, she made an effort to connect with those who reached out to her. When a shy freshman named Mia told her she'd been teased relentlessly by Jake's crew, Emily offered simple advice. Tell someone you trust. You don't have to face it alone. And when a quiet sophomore named Ben admitted he'd been too scared to report being tripped in the cafeteria, Emily encouraged him to speak up. If you don't say something, nothing changes, she told him gently. Slowly but surely, Emily began using her experience, not just her martial arts skills, but her resilience, to help others find their voices. She wasn't trying to be a leader or a role model. She simply wanted to remind people that they weren't powerless. In doing so, she started to repair some of the cracks in the school's culture, replacing fear with solidarity. Still, as she walked home one afternoon, Emily couldn't shake the nagging thought that Jake might not be done yet. For all his bluster, he wasn't the type to let go easily. But for now, the hallways felt quieter, the air lighter. Whatever came next, Emily knew she'd face it head-on, because that's what she'd been taught to do. As the weeks passed, Emily's presence at Willow Creek High began to reshape the school in subtle but meaningful ways. Her actions hadn't just humbled Jake, they had inspired others to rethink their roles in the dynamics of bullying. Students who had once stood silently on the sidelines now found the courage to speak up when they saw someone being mistreated. Teachers noticed a shift too, with more reports of incidents coming forward and fewer instances of unchecked aggression in the hallways. Emily didn't set out to be a leader, but her quiet determination naturally drew people toward her. She became a go-to person for advice, not because she claimed to have all the answers, but because she listened without judgment. When Mia, the freshman who'd confided in her earlier, was cornered by one of Jake's friends after school, Emily stepped in calmly, reminding him that intimidation wasn't going to solve anything. To everyone's surprise, he backed off without a fight, muttering something about not wanting trouble. It was as if Emily's reputation alone carried enough weight to deter even the most stubborn bullies. Jake, meanwhile, kept his distance. He avoided eye contact with Emily in the halls and no longer lingered near her during lunch or gym class. His crew seemed less eager to follow his lead, dispersing into smaller groups rather than rallying around him like before. For the first time in years, Jake wasn't the king of the school, and it showed. His usual swagger had dimmed, replaced by a quiet unease that made him seem almost human. One crisp afternoon, as Emily sat under the oak tree sketching, she felt someone approach hesitantly. Looking up, she was surprised to see Jake standing a few feet away, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, clearing his throat awkwardly, Jake said, "Can we talk?" Emily studied him carefully, searching for signs of hostility or sarcasm. Finding none, she nodded and gestured for him to sit. "What's up?" she asked evenly, keeping her tone neutral. Jake hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have treated you, or anyone, like that. I guess I thought acting tough would make people respect me, but all it did was make them hate me." His words caught Emily off guard. She hadn't expected an apology, let alone one so raw and honest. Setting her sketchbook aside, she leaned back against the tree trunk. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked gently. "Because I don't want to be that guy anymore," Jake admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's exhausting pretending to be something you're not. And after everything that happened, I realized I need to change. Starting with apologizing to you and to everyone else I've hurt." Emily considered his words carefully. Part of her wanted to dismiss him outright, to hold on to the anger and frustration she'd felt during those tense encounters. But another part recognized the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability he rarely showed to anyone. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Apologies are good," she said, "but actions matter more. If you really mean what you're saying, prove it." Jake looked at her, surprised by her response. He braced himself for rejection or ridicule, not practical advice. How? He asked earnestly. Start small, Emily suggested. Stand up for someone instead of tearing them down. Listen when people talk instead of interrupting. Be better, not perfect, just better. For the first time in months, Jake smiled. Not the smug grin he used to wear, but a genuine, tentative smile. Thanks, he said quietly. I'll try. As Jake walked away, Emily picked up her pencil and returned to her sketch. She didn't know if he would follow through on his promise, and she understood that real change took time. But for now, she allowed herself a small sense of hope. Maybe Jake wasn't beyond redemption after all. And maybe, just maybe, the ripple effect of standing up for herself was reaching farther than she'd ever imagined. By the end of the semester, Willow Creek High felt like a different place. The once pervasive culture of fear and intimidation had begun to fade, replaced by something quieter, but far more powerful: respect. Emily Carter wasn't the sole reason for this transformation. Change rarely came from one person alone, but her actions had sparked a chain reaction that spread through the school like sunlight breaking through clouds. Jake Thompson, surprisingly, became an unlikely ally in this shift. True to his word, he started small. At first, it was subtle gestures, holding the door open for classmates instead of letting it slam shut, offering sincere compliments rather than sarcastic jabs. Then, one day during lunch, he stepped in when a younger student was being teased by his former crew. "Leave him alone," Jake said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. His friends hesitated before walking away, clearly confused by his sudden change of heart. But Jake didn't care. He was done playing games. Emily noticed these efforts from afar, though she didn't acknowledge them directly. She knew better than to expect overnight miracles, especially from someone like Jake. Still, there were moments when their paths crossed. A nod in the hallway here, a brief exchange about an assignment there, that hinted at a fragile truce. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was progress. The rest of the school began to follow suit. Students who had once feared speaking up now felt empowered to report bullying incidents without shame or hesitation. Teachers praised the growing sense of unity, organizing workshops and discussions about kindness and empathy. Even the cafeteria seemed less divided, with cliques blending into larger groups that laughed and shared stories over trays of food. For Emily, life settled into a rhythm she hadn't expected when she first arrived. She still spent her lunches under the oak tree, sketching landscapes and occasionally chatting with Mia or Ben, who had become close friends. Her drawings reflected her journey, scenes of strength intertwined with moments of peace, each line telling a story of resilience and growth. When her Uncle Mark visited over winter break, she showed him her latest piece, a lone tree standing tall against a stormy sky. He smiled proudly, clapping her on the shoulder. "Looks like you've got roots stronger than ever, kid." As the final bell rang on the last day of the semester, Emily walked out of the building with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She hadn't come to Willow Creek looking to make waves, but she'd learned that sometimes standing your ground could create ripples that changed everything, for yourself and for others. Back home, as she packed away her sketchbook for the holidays, her mom peeked into her room. "You did good this year, Em," Sarah said softly. "I'm proud of you." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle warmly in her chest. She knew challenges lay ahead. High school was never without its ups and downs. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment. She had faced adversity head-on, stayed true to herself, and inspired others along the way. And in doing so, she proved that real strength wasn't about dominance or aggression. It was about standing firm while lifting others up. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the world in soft white. Emily stood by the window, watching the flakes dance in the wind. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, she felt like she truly belonged.